My ex lied about her job, while I paid all the bills, so I took back my house and never looked back. I'm a 29-year-old guy who thought I had finally met someone different, someone responsible, ambitious, independent. From the moment she walked into my life, I was captivated by the confidence she carried, the kind that made people listen when she spoke. She told me she had a stable corporate job, a promising career path, and that she loved the kind of structure and ambition I lived by. I remember thinking, finally, someone who gets it, someone who understands what hard work looks like. From day one, she seemed to notice all the little things about me. How I never missed a bill payment, how I kept my apartment organized, how I carefully balanced work and life. "I really admire your discipline," she'd say, and I'd feel this warm swell of pride in my chest, like maybe, for once, someone truly appreciated me. Her compliments weren't over the top. They felt genuine, effortless, and I couldn't help but sink deeper into trust. Before I knew it, we were moving in together. I convinced myself it made sense. We were building a partnership, two equal adults pooling our lives. I took on rent, utilities, groceries, and all the little expenses that somehow always landed on my shoulders. She focused on her career, leaving me to manage the finances, the cleaning, the day-to-day logistics. And I was okay with it, or at least I told myself I was. This is what teamwork looks like, I thought. Even then, there were subtle things I brushed aside. A vague story here, a missing receipt there, a night when she had to work late, but wouldn't answer her phone. I noticed, but I didn't push. I felt proud, invested, and maybe a little blinded by the feeling of finally being with someone who seemed to match my pace. It felt right, and I was willing to ignore the tiny shadows in the corners. I went to bed that first week, thinking how lucky I was to find someone who seemed so aligned with me. But that same night, a small, uneasy thought crept in. Why did I feel like I was the only one really working in this relationship? Over the next few months, the routine settled in. I woke up every morning, brewed my coffee, and checked the bills I had to cover. Rent, utilities, groceries, subscription services, everything. She left early for her job, or at least that's what she told me, and I'd see her home late at night, often too tired to talk. I told myself it was normal. Corporate jobs are demanding, after all. But slowly, I started noticing patterns. Phone calls she had to take lasted hours. She dodged casual questions about projects, meetings, and coworkers. One evening, while folding laundry, I asked, "So, how's the Henderson account going? Did you finalize the report today?" She froze for a second, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Yeah, it's fine," she said, too quickly, too vaguely. My stomach sank, but I told myself I was overthinking. I pushed the feeling down, reminding myself of the life we were building together. I handled the finances, cooked the meals, made the apartment feel like home. It felt good to contribute, to provide stability. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a quiet, nagging thought grew. Am I carrying more than my share? Friends started noticing changes in me too. "You look exhausted, man. Are you sure this isn't too much?" one asked casually during a night out. I shrugged it off. I was proud to be the reliable one, the guy who could handle responsibility. They didn't see the subtle strain building, the way I'd lie awake calculating how much I had spent that month, and whether we could cover next month's rent without dipping into my savings. I tried to enjoy the moments we shared, the laughter over dinner, the Netflix shows, the lazy Sundays. But the undercurrent of imbalance kept tugging at me. And then, one rainy Thursday night, I caught her laughing on a call, her shoulders shaking, soft and secretive. I didn't recognize the voice she was talking to, and it wasn't her boss. My chest tightened, and I felt that first real stab of doubt. I wanted to ask, to confront, but something held me back. That night, as rain pattered against the window, and the apartment smelled faintly of wet concrete and old coffee, I wondered silently, am I being a fool, or is this just stress? It started with little inconsistencies that gnawed at me like a quiet itch I couldn't scratch. Receipts she forgot to file, stories about meetings that never quite added up, casual mentions of coworkers I'd never heard her talk about before. I found myself double-checking schedules, subtly scanning her texts when she left her phone unattended. I hated that I was doing it, hated feeling like a detective in my own home, but the unease had grown too big to ignore. One Saturday afternoon, I asked her, "Hey, didn't you have a client presentation this morning?" She looked startled, her hand hovering over the mug she was stirring. Yeah, that got postponed," she said. But the pause, the hesitation, made my stomach knot. It wasn't just the lie. It was the confidence with which she delivered it, like she expected me to accept it without question. I wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that she was stressed or had a genuine reason, but my mind kept circling, replaying all the tiny details that never fit together. I started noticing how she avoided introducing me to anyone from her office, how she never invited me to after-work events, how calls she claimed were team check-ins often lasted long into the night. A creeping sense of betrayal started to settle in, making my chest tight and restless. I tried talking to her casually, slipping in questions like, "Can you show me the project you've been working on?" But she brushed me off, claiming deadlines, privacy, or stress. Each brush-off made me feel smaller, like my concern was unreasonable. Even though anxiety buzzed at the edges of my thoughts, I kept providing, kept covering bills, keeping the apartment stocked, managing every detail. I rationalized it. Maybe this is just how adults support each other. Maybe I'm overthinking. But the gut feeling never left. One night, I overheard laughter from her side of the room. Soft, secretive, like a conversation that didn't include me. My heart sank in a way I hadn't felt before, and I realized something was very, very wrong. Things started unraveling faster than I expected. The little inconsistencies that I once brushed off were now impossible to ignore. She was working late, again, but the pattern had changed. The nights she claimed were important deadlines stretched into hours of silence, her phone always pressed to her ear, her face lit by the glow of the screen. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that she needed space to focus, but the unease gnawed at me relentlessly. One evening, I asked casually, "Do you want to go out for dinner after work? Maybe take a break?" She shook her head, her smile tight and practiced. "I can't tonight. I have a lot to handle at the office," she said, voice clipped. But as I glanced at the corner of the room, I noticed the faint hum of a video call, her laughter carrying in a way that didn't sound like a professional meeting. My chest tightened, and the pit in my stomach returned, heavier this time. Even daily life started to feel off balance. I was doing everything: groceries, bills, cooking, cleaning, even coordinating social plans. She contributed little beyond occasional sarcastic remarks about my workaholic tendencies or obsessive planning. Friends began noticing my exhaustion. "Dude, you look beat. Are you sure she's worth all this stress?" one asked over drinks. I forced a laugh, hiding the anxiety that now sat in the pit of my chest like a stone. I started questioning everything: the way she talked about work, the way she avoided friends, the way she always seemed to vanish for hours. I'd catch myself staring at her phone screen across the room, willing it to show something I wasn't ready to see. The apartment, once a place of comfort, now felt heavy, tense and unwelcoming. And then, one Thursday night, I heard her whispering with someone on a call, words like, "You'll love this," and laughter that wasn't meant for me. My pulse spiked, and I felt a cold wash of dread hit my chest. That night, the apartment felt suffocating, and I realized this was no longer just about imbalance. Something far bigger was quietly unfolding. By now, I had started tallying everything I'd spent since moving in together. Rent, utilities, groceries, dinners out, random purchases she claimed were work essentials. It all added up to tens of thousands. My savings, which I had painstakingly built over years, were shrinking faster than I realized. I felt proud at first, thinking, this is love. This is what partnership looks like. But the pride quickly curdled into exhaustion and quiet resentment. Every night I'd sit at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a map of my life, my fingers tracing numbers until they blurred together. I caught myself muttering under my breath, "How is it that I'm always the one holding everything together?" I tried to hide it, keep smiling, keep telling myself she was busy, stressed, overworked. But the weight was relentless. The financial burden had started eating at my self-esteem, making me feel small, trapped, and taken for granted. She started making subtle digs, too. Casual remarks about my frugality, my obsession with numbers, or how I always stress over money instead of enjoying life. Every word stung more than I expected. Friends noticed I was quieter, more withdrawn, and I could feel the distance growing between us. I couldn't shake the sense that my efforts weren't just unnoticed. They were expected, taken for granted, even mocked in subtle ways. And then came the first real moment of panic. I glanced at the bank account one morning and realized we were dangerously close to overdraft if I didn't transfer more money immediately. My heart pounded, my hands shook slightly, and I felt a flash of anger and helplessness I hadn't felt in years. This was supposed to be a partnership, but it had become a one-sided treadmill. That night, while she lounged on the couch scrolling through her phone, laughing softly at something I couldn't see, a cold realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I've been funding her life while she's hiding something from me, and I didn't know how deep the deception went. I knew something was off, but I never expected the truth to hit me like this. One evening, curiosity and a gnawing sense of dread pushed me to check a few details I had ignored before. Employment records, professional references, anything that could verify her stories. What I found made my chest tighten and my hands go cold. She never had the corporate job she claimed. None of it. The promotions, the big projects, the late nights at work, all lies. She had been living off my income this entire time while pretending to be independent. I sat there staring at the screen, disbelief clawing at me. My brain couldn't process it at first. I thought, no, there must be some mistake. This can't be real. But as I cross-checked documents and called a few of the contacts she'd given me, the truth became undeniable. Every explanation she ever offered, every excuse for her absences, every vague story about work, fabricated. She had been feeding me a carefully constructed illusion while I funded her entire lifestyle. Anger, betrayal, and humiliation all collided at once. I felt like a fool, like every late-night calculation, every covered bill, every ounce of effort had been manipulated. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage built from lies. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to shake her and demand answers, but I held myself back, breathing shallowly, my hands trembling. I realized the dynamic we had wasn't just imbalanced, it was toxic. She wasn't stressed or overworked. She was a con artist in the guise of a partner. My mind raced with questions. Who else knows? How long has this been going on? How could I have been so blind? And then a new clarity emerged. I wasn't going to stay trapped in this deception. I would find a way to take back control of my life, my finances, and my home. That night, as rain splattered against the windows and the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and stale tension, I sat frozen, staring at the glow of my laptop. A silent determination grew inside me. This ends on my terms, but I didn't yet know how far I'd have to go. The next morning, I couldn't wait any longer. I confronted her, trying to keep my voice steady, even as my hands shook. I checked. "You don't have the job you've been telling me about," I said, placing the documents on the kitchen table. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought maybe she'd confess. Instead, she scoffed lightly, a mix of annoyance and defensiveness in her voice. "What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. You're imagining things," she said, brushing past the papers as if they didn't exist. My chest tightened, frustration bubbling under the surface. "Don't lie to me. I called your references. I checked the company. None of it is true. You've been lying about everything," I said, voice rising despite myself. She shook her head, her smile thin and cold, and replied, "I can't believe you'd go behind my back like this. Are you really accusing me of lying?" The audacity of it stunned me. My mind raced, trying to process the mix of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me, not just physical, but emotional. Months of trust, money, and effort had been stolen under the guise of love. And now she was twisting it, making me question my own sanity. The apartment felt smaller, the walls pressing in, as tension thickened the air. I could hear the faint hum of the city outside, cars splashing through puddles, people laughing on the streets, life continuing normally while my world crumbled. For a moment, I considered walking away silently, pretending nothing happened. But something inside me snapped. I realized this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about reclaiming control. Every calculated lie she had told me, every late night, every fabricated story, it all demanded a response. I would not allow her to manipulate me further. That night, I sat alone on the couch, papers spread around me, the weight of betrayal pressing down. I stared at her across the room, her expression calm, almost smug, and I realized, this ends now. But how far will I have to go to make her understand the consequences? After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't stay passive anymore. I started quietly taking control of everything, my finances, our shared accounts, even the paperwork for the apartment. I went through every joint bill, every recurring subscription, every shared expense, untangling the mess she had helped create. It was exhausting, meticulous work, but with every spreadsheet I updated, every account I secured, I felt a small spark of empowerment. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just reacting, I was acting. I remember the apartment feeling different that night, almost electric. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint smell of her leftover coffee, even the distant sirens outside. It all felt sharper, more immediate, like the world was urging me to wake up. I began envisioning a plan to reclaim, not just my money, but my life. Every lie she had told me would no longer hold power over me. I had become a strategist in my own home, and it felt almost surreal to see the shift in perspective. She noticed it too. The first time I calmly asked her to transfer her share of a utility bill, her expression flickered. Confusion, anger, something like panic. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" she asked, voice clipped. I didn't respond with anger. I just looked at her, my jaw tight, my hands steady. "It's time you start being responsible for your own life," I said, and left it at that. The quiet authority in my voice seemed to rattle her more than any argument could. That night, I went to bed feeling a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. I was tired from the months of deception, from the confrontation, from untangling the mess, but I also felt alive, alert, ready. I realized that taking control didn't mean revenge yet, but it meant I was finally the one calling the shots. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I could hear her pacing in the living room, murmuring to herself, the first cracks of panic in her otherwise confident facade. I smiled faintly to myself, knowing the balance of power was shifting, and soon she would have no choice but to face the truth. Just when I thought I had some control, she struck in ways I hadn't anticipated. Overnight, the apartment felt heavy, oppressive, like the walls themselves were pressing in. She began escalating emotionally, shouting accusations, throwing passive-aggressive comments about my obsession with money, and twisting every small confrontation into a proof of my supposed cruelty. I felt the isolation tighten around me, suffocating and sharp, as though every ounce of effort I'd poured into the relationship had been weaponized against me. One night, after yet another argument over bills, she slammed the door to our bedroom and whispered, almost menacingly, "You think you can control everything? Let's see how that works out." My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for the first time in weeks, I questioned if I could handle this alone. I had lost sleep, energy, and even a sense of who I was before her lies began. Every step I took to regain control seemed to be met with manipulation. Every attempt at calm reason twisted into guilt tripping. I sat on the couch for hours that night, staring at the dull glow of the kitchen light, the sound of rain splattering against the window, and the faint hum of traffic outside. I felt completely and utterly alone, a mix of anger, despair, and helplessness swirling in my chest. The realization hit me like a punch. I had invested my life, my money, my trust into someone who had never been honest. I wanted to scream, to storm out, to abandon everything, but even that felt impossible. The apartment, my finances, our shared history, all tethered me to this toxic spiral. My mind raced, trying to envision a way out without losing everything I had worked so hard for. And then, as I sat slumped against the couch cushions, the apartment silent except for her soft muttering in the next room, I felt a clarity amidst the chaos. I can't let this break me, I thought. I have to end this on my terms. But how far will I have to go? After the lowest point, I realized I needed a plan, not an emotional meltdown. I started methodically untangling everything she had manipulated. The finances, the lease, even the small everyday conveniences she had taken for granted. I made lists, documented transactions, and organized evidence of every lie, every hidden expense, every late-night call she had used to cover her deceit. The more I cataloged, the more empowered I felt. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was strategizing. I called the bank and updated account permissions, ensuring she could no longer access funds without my knowledge. I quietly contacted the landlord and reviewed the lease, making sure all legal rights were secured in my favor. Every calculated step chipped away at the control she had wielded over me. I could almost feel her sense of invincibility begin to crumble. One evening, she noticed the changes. Her voice wavered as she asked, "Why are you doing all this? Why are you controlling everything?" I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I just looked at her calmly, voice firm but steady. "I'm taking responsibility for my life. It's time you take responsibility for yours." The look on her face, confusion, panic, and the first flicker of fear, was almost satisfying. I realized she had underestimated my patience, my ability to endure, and my resolve. As the days passed, she tried subtle manipulations, but nothing worked. I stayed calm, measured, and deliberate, letting every lie she had told backfire in small, undeniable ways. Friends and family began noticing her cracks, and the subtle truth of her deceit became impossible to hide. By the time I finished reorganizing our life, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Every careful step brought me closer to reclaiming not just my finances, but my dignity. The apartment felt lighter, the air clearer, and for the first time in months, I felt the spark of hope. I knew the final confrontation was coming, and this time, it would be on my terms. The day I finally moved back fully into my apartment alone felt surreal. I remember unlocking the door and stepping inside, the familiar scent of my own space hitting me like a wave of relief. For months, I had been trapped, not just by lies and manipulation, but by the constant emotional weight of doubt, exhaustion, and silent betrayal. Now every corner of the apartment felt mine again. Every sound, every shadow, every ray of sunlight in the morning. It was a small freedom, but it felt monumental. She had no access to my accounts, no ability to manipulate bills, and no legal claim to the space I had worked to maintain. I watched from a distance as friends and family, now aware of the truth, began to see her for what she really was. The satisfaction wasn't about revenge, it was about validation. Months of deceit and manipulation had been stripped bare, and the narrative she tried to control no longer existed. I spent the first evening organizing, cleaning, and reclaiming little things I hadn't realized she had subtly taken over. The kitchen, the living room, even the mailbox. Each small victory was a reminder of the control I had regained and the dignity I had preserved. I reflected on the anger and despair I had felt, feeling them soften into something sharper, clarity. I also allowed myself to breathe, truly breathe, for the first time in months. The anxiety that had perched on my chest, the racing heart, the sleepless nights, all of it began to fade. I could laugh at a text from a friend without guilt, plan my finances without fear, and sleep without the constant hum of uncertainty in my mind. Sitting on my couch that night, the apartment quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside, I felt a sense of justice that had nothing to do with punishment. I had taken back my life, my money, my space, and my peace of mind. And most importantly, I had done it on my own terms. But deep down, I knew there was one last confrontation waiting, one final reckoning to ensure she truly understood the consequences of her lies. Sitting in my apartment alone, I finally allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. The months of trust, deception, and manipulation played through my mind like a movie I wished I hadn't starred in. I thought about every late-night conversation, every bill I covered, every time I ignored that tiny, gnawing doubt in my gut. It hurt, it stung, but it also taught me something invaluable about boundaries, trust, and self-respect. For the first time, I could see the relationship for what it truly was, a carefully crafted illusion designed to exploit me. And yet, I also saw my own resilience. I had survived, strategized, and reclaimed my life without letting anger or rash decisions dictate my actions. The apartment smelled like fresh coffee and clean sheets, the hum of the city outside soft and steady, a comforting reminder that life continued, and I was finally free to move forward. I spent the next few days untangling the last remnants of her presence, closing old accounts, removing shared subscriptions, and reclaiming items that were truly mine. Each small act was a declaration. I was done being manipulated. Friends who had watched from the sidelines reached out, expressing shock, relief, and admiration. Their validation felt like a balm, a reminder that the truth always finds its way out. Most importantly, I realized I didn't need revenge to feel justice. I had my independence, my dignity, and my peace. I could laugh without guilt, plan my future without fear, and sleep without the constant tension that had gripped me for months. Life felt lighter, sharper, and more vibrant than it had in years. As I sat on the balcony that evening, watching the city lights flicker, I made a quiet promise to myself. Never again would I allow someone else's lies to define my worth. I had been deceived, yes, but I had reclaimed control, and that made me stronger, wiser, and finally free. And somewhere deep inside, I smiled, knowing that this chapter of my life was over, and I would never look back.